All right.
Excellent. Nice work.
Okay. So let's go ahead and get started with this interview then. So first
You
of
bet.
all, Mr. Bernstein, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself for the audience.
Yeah, so I'm Dave Bernstein. I'm live in Sioux City, Iowa. I'm one of the owners and officers of State Steel Supply Company and Sioux City Compressed Steel. We're in the steel service center business and also the scrap business as well. And I also run a music festival called Saturday in the Park Festival, and work heavily. I'm the president of the Orpheum Theater Board of Directors as well. So I get involved in a lot of things.
All right. Next question. How did you get to where you are now?
That's a good question. I would say that I went to high school and high school in Sioux City, and really enjoyed math and computer programming. A couple things I liked in school, and even typing. And when I was in school as well, I somehow became a DJ. I think that goes way back to when I was a younger kid. And I used to like something called the muscular dystrophy carnivals, where you could raise money for the muscular dystrophy telethon by getting a kit and having a carnival in your backyard and selling, tickets and having prizes for kids. And then you take all the money down that you raised and put it in something called the fish bowl, and win some prizes and donate money for muscular dystrophy. And so I got a kind of an entertainment bug as well. So that led me to DJing dances when I was in high school also. And I went to college and ended up studying industrial engineering at Northwestern. And I did so primarily so that I didn't have to take a language. I took about 3 years of Spanish in high school, and I really wish I knew how to speak Spanish well. But I could tell after about a week I was really going to struggle in college. So I didn't pursue that any further, and I switched to engineering, assuming it would be easier. And ultimately, after college and a little bit of grad school, I ended up back in Sioux City and working in the family business at State Steel. And then I also ended up at that time taking some music and promoting skills I developed from high school and then later in college, working with different bands, and started the music festival in Sioux City as well, kind of out of boredom, for lack of a better way to put it. And and so all that kind of stuff got going all at the same time. One of the early things that helped me at State Steel was I took over a project very early in my career there. A lot of the processes there were manual, and I had a pretty good aptitude for computers. And I did a small project where at first we digitized a lot of drawings that people were making by hand, schematic drawings that people were making up by hand and putting on sales orders. And we put those into a Mac using FileMaker and Mac Draw. And so they could be easily repeatable. And I built a database, and then that kind of jumped me into the next thing, which was a project to recomputerize everything we did and computerize a lot of it. And I did a big, I researched about 70 different software packages, got brochures on 70 different packages and proposals from a dozen, and interviewed 3 and went out to do demos. Ended up picking one and then overseeing the deployment of it. And that taught me an awful lot pretty quickly over the course of a couple of years about our business and what everybody does and systems in general. So that had a lot to do with it, I think.
And that's how you got to where you are now?
That's how I what?
That's how you got to where you are now?
I think so, yeah. And doing whatever, just whatever they needed me to do. I helped us get into flat laser cutting. Around the time I was in grad school, I flew up to Portland and looked at someone who had a laser cutter. We hadn't gotten into it yet and felt that we could easily get into it. We were doing flame cutting and plasma torch cutting. So I kind of led that initiative and other equipment and machine projects along the way too. So yeah, it kind of led me to today pretty much.
Rather, well, in some ways eventful and others a bit mundane, I suppose.
Oh yeah, no, there's a lot of mundane for sure in business, and some things can take a long time and require patience. And you have to sometimes endure the mundane, with the exciting stuff. Certainly for me, I'm very project oriented. So I like projects and I like seeing them come to fruition. And that's always exciting when when you order a new coil line, as an example, to cut big steels of coil into sheets. You might order a coil line and you don't see it for a year and a half. So it's kind of anticlimactic after you research it and order it, but then, maybe a year later, you're starting to work on putting in a foundation and electrical and making plans and figuring out who's going to run it. And then, all of a sudden one day it shows up and it takes 3 or 4 weeks to get it installed. And one day you start to run it, and it takes you weeks or months to, really iron that out. But, in the end, you look up a couple years later and say, wow, that was pretty rewarding. A lot of hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
So, how long have you been working at State Steel?
Well, I worked there in high school, so that would have been in the early 80s, a little bit. I had triple early dismissal when I was a senior because I'd taken a bunch of classes over the summer at independent learning. And they were very easy at independent learning. So I could knock out help from government and things like that in the matter of a couple weeks. And that got me to the point where as a senior, I only took 4 out of 7 classes by last semester. And I, got out of school at 12:30 every day. I didn't even before lunch, I think. And I was going home and laying around on the couch and had lunch at home and watched a lot of sitcoms all afternoon and took naps. And after about 2 weeks of that, my folks said, this isn't really going to keep going on this way. I think you should start working. So then I started working in the afternoons and worked in the summers during college, a few summers there. I worked in Lake Okoboji for a summer. That was probably the best job of my life, but even sailboat rides. But so I started in the early 80s and then went away to college, worked in the summers, and then went to grad school in, I think, 91, or maybe 91, 92. But after grad school, I came back after the LA riots and pretty much stayed there permanently. I did the computerization project at that point, and I've been there ever since. So that's been, we say 92, 93, I was there permanently. Figure you got that's about 30 years, give or take. It's a long time.
Yeah, thereabouts. So then, while working at State Steel, what was your favorite project?
The computerization project was a pretty good one. It really, was all new learning for me. It was uncharted territory. It took quite a long time, but it was very rewarding. Later on, the laser cutting projects were very rewarding as well. 2 of the big coil lines that I was in charge of putting in were very rewarding. I was in charge of a few of our new locations from scratch, Omaha and Des Moines. Those were very rewarding projects, and I oversaw a number of acquisitions, and the building of a brand new greenfield scrap site in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. That one was super rewarding because I worked on that one for about 7 years before we finally got it permitted and built. So the day we broke ground on it, and the day we actually started operating there, were really rewarding because they had been so long in the making. That you just really felt good about the process.
So I worked on quite a few. So I suppose your official position is what, chief officer?
My current position would be, president of a certain amount of the entities, but not all of them, and one of the owners. Um, so in a lot of cases, I'm, the key decision maker, if you will, that people report to, or in some cases, my dad might be, as well. But I'm involved with pretty much every major decision that we make on anything pretty major.
Okay. Well, is there anything significant that you have learned in your 30 odd years of working at State Steel?
Yeah, a lot of things I've learned and forgotten, unfortunately. But you're in an organization like ours, you really need good people to work with, and you work with them. They don't work for you; they work with you, because without me, the thing can survive, but without them, everybody else is nothing. So I've really learned that, and I've learned that with the music festival as well, where I lead that, but it's really run by others, and I just try to be around and handy for things that go wrong. So that's probably the first and foremost thing. I've learned really how to analyze, I think, opportunities in a certain way and problems. And I think some of this is my industrial engineering background, where I can really kind of quantify things, even if they're qualitative type things, and kind of just visualize, like, kind of, to get from point A to point C or D, if you will, what steps you got to go through, and what critical things there are along the way that could be good or bad, to make or break the different things that you're trying to make happen. So I think that skill's been one that I honed in business, and I think sometimes I take it for granted a little bit that maybe I have an ability to sort of see problems in a different way, and see solutions in a different way than a lot of people do. A lot of it's troubleshooting. It's the same logic one would use if you had, say, an electrical problem in a computer system or a big processing line, and how you go through process of elimination and just really think through, like, what if this happens? What if that happens? I did this before and it didn't work. I did this before and it did work. Here's a good concept. Here's a person that's really good at doing this type of thing. That person's not so good at doing that kind of thing. So I think that's probably the biggest skill that I've learned throughout the years. And I've also learned that, you always save just about everybody's phone number, because you never know when you're going to want to contact them, especially their cell phone numbers. And you also don't burn bridges, because you never know when someone you might be angry at today might be your best ally or friend down the road. And, so those are other really, really good lessons, I think, as well, that I picked up along the way.
Yeah. So plenty of experience in project leading and working with people. It sounds like is a big skill that you've picked up then.
A lot of people, and working with people sometimes is the hardest part of everything. I mean, people are critical to what anybody does, and pretty much, and it can be hard to work with other people. People have feelings and emotions and respond in different ways to different things, and kind of understanding how to manage and deal with all that, and make sure that people enjoy what they're doing and find it challenging and rewarding. That's a trick, but that can be rewarding for you as well, when you see someone really having a good time, or thriving, or feeling really a good sense of accomplishment. That can be rewarding as well. And I always try to intertwine a certain amount of humor into things, because I think that in the end, but as I say a lot, I mean, certainly safety and things like that are critical and can be life or death. But a lot of what we do on a daily basis with decisions, it's not life or death. And so sometimes that perspective is important. So sometimes it's good to, be able to even deal with some tense situations, but still joke around a little bit. And I always find that pulling out some good movie references is always great. For me, lines from Caddyshack and Hogan's Heroes and stuff like that are always very handy at the right times, and just intertwining a little humor into things so that people kind of enjoy and laugh a little bit along the way.
Right. So, lessons you've learned. So there's the people skills, and then there's the actual project management skills, the actual
Sure.
management of, I guess, making sure that things get done.
Yep. And
Right.
that part, could be a challenge as well. I learned from a guy named Ray Shepherdson when I was involved heavily with restoring the Orpheum Theater in Sioux City, that so much of project management is about the process. That statement seems trite initially, but it truly is about how you decide to approach something like redoing a theater can be more or less successful depending on how you approach it. And he had a method of approaching theater restoration by treating it as a remodel and finding a good balance of people coming in and fixing things, and then people coming in and redoing things. Whereas other architects and people might have just said, "Oh, we're going to draw it all up and tear everything out and start over with heating and air conditioning, and electrical, all that." But his process was very different. And I think a lot of project management to me is looking at a project and trying to figure out how do you tackle that problem or that project or opportunity. What are your steps? Like looking at it first and thinking about that and saying, okay, what is a good efficient way to deal with that from start to finish? Who do I want to have on board? What resources should I be talking to? On and on and on. And so project management, I find very challenging and rewarding. And I like to, kind of work through stuff and visualize, how to really get after things, and kind of fun.
So I overheard you say heavily involved in the restoration of the Orpheum Theater.
That is true.
I would like to hear about that.
Yeah, so that was a great opportunity that I quite a bit younger. The Orpheum reopened in 2001, and it took us about 2.5 years to restore it prior to. So, we really started. I was probably involved from about 2000 or about 1996, I would say. And there was a group of people that had bought the theater and were trying to figure out how to restore it. It was a challenge, and I had come along as someone who had started this music festival, and I was really interested in a location in Sioux City where somebody like B.B. King could play. B.B. King wouldn't have sold out the arena or the auditorium at the time in Sioux City, which held like 6,000 people. At least I didn't believe he would, but I felt like a theater that held 1,500 people or 2,000 people or something like that would be a good size, for something. So the Orpheum held 2,500 people, and so I kept bugging the guys that were on the committee that were going to restore it, and I apparently bugged them too much. And they invited me to a meeting, and at the meeting they appointed me to the board, and I couldn't really say no, so there I was on the board. And so I got involved, and I helped raise money. We raised about $12.5 million, and I helped heavily with a lot of the decisions and work on restoring theater, and then worked heavily from the board perspective on getting it reopened and getting some content booked in there, and getting it off the ground, and going with staff and everything else, and I'm still to this day on the board. Yeah, and it was a really wonderful opportunity. I mean, I remember thinking at the time it was very dilapidated. It had been converted. It was originally a movie palace that was built in the 20s when they weren't sure if movies were going to work. So it was made for vaudeville and movies. Very ornate theater designed by some guys named Rap and Rap out of Chicago. And it was, in the hosted vaudeville for quite a while. And then I think in the 50s or 60s was maybe converted to a single screen movie theater, which I remembered as a kid. And then in the 80s was converted to a twin movie theater. And that's when everybody was really, really concerned about energy efficiency. So they put in a bunch of suspended ceilings to lower the ceiling height, and in the process destroyed all the beautiful ornate ceiling, and on and on and on. And then it was set dormant for a decade or more. And at one point, Mid-American Energy or Midwest Energy at the time owned it. They let all their employees come in and take light fixtures out of it, horrible things like that. And then we restored it. So my point there was that there was a long amount of time that I didn't know if we were going to be able to raise the money or not, and if it would really happen. I mean, I worked on that with a lot of people for a couple of years without knowing that it really was going to happen. Some projects you get involved with, and they're going to take place. But that one we never knew. And in raising money, we were lucky enough that at some point, the Waite brothers, who had started Gateway Computers, gave us a very, very generous gift, not only for restoring the theater, but also an endowment to maintain the theater afterwards, which we still have today. And it was generous enough that the day we got the check from them was the day that I knew that the theater would reopen. So jumping from there to the actual reopening night, it was just surreal and probably the most rewarding project I've ever worked on, for sure. So yeah, just great. It's a place that hosts Broadway and the symphony and dance and a lot of rock shows and country shows, which I like. Rock. There's a big country show there the other night. Very big crowd, and people love it's a beautiful space, really beautiful, and great acoustics, and just a lot of fun. So that's been a great opportunity for me, for sure.
Yes, and certainly a good thing for the community. I've been in there a few times. Quite beautiful.
Yeah. No, people love it. And it took the community to do it. It was, I was part of a team, and I wasn't even necessarily in charge of the team. And but I contributed, and just a lot of people got involved. I remember when we were raising money, we had the entire theater was full of scaffolding. You could get within 18 inches of every wall and 36 inches of every ceiling. And there were painters and plasterers, reworking, fixing the plaster and painting and all that good stuff. And they had a plaster shop up on one of the floors, and they could, if they found a spot of broken plaster, they could find another spot where a pattern appeared, and they could go and they could make a little rubber mold of what was broken, go upstairs and pour some plaster in it, and then turn around and the day later they'd have a hunk of plaster and they'd cut it in and smooth it in. And there were guys doing that, and there were people making stencils and doing gold leaf and all kinds of stuff. I mean, true craftsmen. And this is really, really a wonderful, wonderful project.
Indeed, must have been quite a sight to behold. So why don't you tell me about a project of yours that has failed then?
There's been a few. I've had a decent amount of music shows that I promoted that have failed. And those are always, right away. The beautiful thing about promoting concerts, which I've done quite a few of, is that it's like a small business project. It's like starting a business, running the business, and closing the business all within 90 days to 6 months, because you book a band, You sign a contract with the hall or wherever you're going to have the show. You put it on sale. You sell tickets. The band shows up. The show plays. You count the money. You pay the bills. You see if you made some money, and you're done. And you look back and say, "Wow, I made a lot of money, or I lost a lot of money." The first big show I did was at the baseball stadium in Sioux City, and it was a show with BB King and um, Delbert McClinton and the Neville Brothers and Kenny Wayne Shepherd, and it was a show I booked at the last minute. I saw that they were going to be between Minneapolis and Kansas City, and I booked them for a pretty good price and had them play out there. There'd never been a show out there, and we didn't have that many tickets sold a week out, so we didn't get any porta pots. And then we sold, we might have sold 2,000 tickets a week out, and then we sold 1,000 tickets a week of and 1,000 tickets the day before. So we didn't have any porta pots. So right away we had to basically leave the gates open so all the men could urinate out in the parking lot, and turned all the restrooms that we had into women's restrooms. And so that was sort of an interesting failure, but we made a ton of money on that show, a lot of money. We were partners with the city. The city made a lot of money. And we took all that money and we were on a roll. We were going to, next stop was the next show. We booked the Neville Brothers to play in Omaha 6 months later, and we promoted that show, and we lost all the money we made. So that was one of my bigger acute failures. At one point, we opened a self-service parts yard in Sioux City. Seemed like it was the thing to do. We spent a bunch of money buying a spot, prepping the spot, setting it all up so people could go and pay $2 to get in and wrench off their own starter or engine or whatever. And we ran that for a while, a couple of years, and lost a lot of money doing that. And finally closed that sucker down too. So, those were a couple of the more fresh ones that I can remember.
Huh. So, remembering one line you had said when discussing your goal, apologies, when discussing your role in the restoration of the Orpheum Theater, raising $12 million. How exactly does one raise $12 million?
Well, very carefully. I'm kidding, but we hired so we had some people heavily vested in the thing, and we hired a professional fundraiser, and what he was good at doing was kind of breaking down the amount we need to raise and organizing it, and coming up with a plan. And he didn't raise any money himself. He kind of helped us, told us how to raise money, coached us. So we that was a good thing for us. And we this guy Alan Draney, he was very, very good, very talented guy, and we worked with him. And then we also worked with some other folks, but we divided it up into different pieces. You had a group of people, group of companies that you might go to and ask for somewhere between $100,000 and $500,000. And then you had a group of people that you might go, ask for $50,000 to $100,000. Maybe there's a group of people you ask for $5,000 to $20,000. Different chunks like that, and that's how you do it. And you kind of divide that up. You come with a plan, and then you execute the plan, and that's what we did. And we did a nice job of it. And we had some board members that were very generous, and the Waite brothers, as I mentioned, were very generous, and we overraised, and we were surprised. I think part of when you raise money like that, part of the kicker is you gotta the board members got to contribute as well. So it's hard to ask people to give money if you haven't given money yourself. And people gave that run the board to their own, the best of their ability. So maybe somebody gave, $100,000, and then someone gave $5,000, but maybe the two meant about the same, depending on what different people had different things to offer. And so that was important, and the board did participate 100%, which was good. And that was very important. The biggest thing I learned from that, by the way, was never, ever, in a lot of cases, unless someone really pushes you, don't be very slow to tell someone how much you want, because in a number of cases, there's a guy that gave a $500,000 that we were talking about asking for $100,000. Thankfully we didn't. And the Wait brothers, we never asked them for one dime. We just asked them to participate, and they gave us way more money than we ever thought they would. Way more. So, lucky for us, we didn't in either case. You just want to be very humble and sell people on the project and get them very excited about it. I think a lot of times when people get excited and they figure out what you need to raise, they'll respond accordingly. So,
Well then, I'd
how about
say
that?
certainly interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So something I'd like to
It
know
was
is about
crazy.
a little bit of your upbringing, because you've discussed basically starting your life in high school, but we all know you didn't just appear at what, 16 or whatever.
Best I can remember, I appeared at 16, but yes, you are correct. Yeah, I was born, to a couple of Jewish parents, Gail and Jack Bernstein. They had met at University of Minnesota and moved back to Sioux City. They're pretty all right people in my book. And so they had me, and I grew up in Sioux City, and went to school, and all my schooling in Sioux City. Kind of lived pretty much not too. There wasn't. I didn't make it too far. I didn't move too far away. I kind of just stayed in the same general area the whole time, and in fact today I live probably within a half a mile of the house I grew up in when I went to grade school. But we were Jewish. We're Jewish. I went to Hebrew school. I didn't love Hebrew school. I went to Sunday school. I didn't love Sunday school. I had the best kindergarten teacher ever. I'm convinced I was her favorite student, although I'm pretty sure I wasn't. Miss Dwyer, she's still around. I run into her all the time. She's a fantastic lady. I think she had a lot to do with my success, learning how to read, I think. I don't know. And fun stuff like that. So I really got, some good, some good influences, certainly growing up. And I had a younger sister who's about a year and a half younger than me, and a brother who's 8 years younger than me. And they're okay as well. And yeah, so pretty good, pretty decent setup in the whole scope of things. Got a pretty cool aunt and uncle that live in town, some cousins as well, and they live in town. And yeah, we've always had a pretty close family, and that's nice.
Yeah. All right. It seems that a lot of your life has been spent doing a bit of the same thing. Doesn't sound like you've been entirely stagnant, but still.
Yeah, I mean, there is a part of my life certainly that is that has stayed in Sioux City, right, and hasn't moved too far from there, and for sure, no question. And so yeah, I kind of deal with that. And sometimes I have some regrets. At one point here, quite a while ago, maybe 15 years ago now, I got a condo in Chicago, because I had gone to school in the Chicago area and loved spending time there, and it was close to Sioux City. So at different times in my life, I've spent a lot of time in Chicago, and I love that. I still have the condo and still like to go there at times, to kind of keep me, in touch with. I love big cities. I love restaurants and live music scene, and up and coming bands, and a lot of arts and entertainment like that. And so that's been good. But yeah, I mean, I have been in Sioux City for 30 plus years, and you know, there's trade-offs, right? Well, like everything. I mean, I think some people that move around might look for that consistency, where somebody like me is like, man, I really wish I would have gone and lived in New York for a period of time, or actually lived in Chicago for a period of time, or California or something.
Hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, I have been to Sioux City quite a while. I tried to get some jobs in California. At one point I was looking, I interviewed with Disney to be an Imagineer, and which was really the job I wanted, my dream job. And I also interviewed with another company that was basically building roller coasters and rides for Universal Studios. And they were in LA, and they wanted me to come in as a young kid right out of college. And there was a lot of faxes at the time. It was kind of before email was really crazy. Faxes would come in with drawings, and they want, you know, the job was to come in at like 10 at night when engineers in Japan were faxing drawings, and take the drawings and then put them on copiers and blow them up, so that engineers in the States had, you know, on their desk at 7 in the morning or 8 in the morning when they got there, you know, good crisp flat copies of everything, because the fax machines were all thermal paper, and so they would curl up, they would roll, and so you couldn't really work, you know, on blueprints, and then also they need to be blown up. So that was a job they wanted. And, you know, it wasn't really intriguing to me. In hindsight, it was a mistake, because I think any job like that, I learned later with some other jobs I have, that once I got in the door somewhere, I usually was given responsibility pretty quickly, and usually advanced pretty quickly, because I was pretty all right with responsibility. I kind of lived in fear of not getting stuff done. Um, so yeah, that was a thing. Yeah, and I, you know, regrets of not taking those entry level jobs, but maybe I wouldn't have been able to do some of the stuff that I've done if I would have lived in LA. Although I like LA, just for the record.
All right, duly noted. All right. I will say we are about a minute left before Zoom kicks me out,
Okay.
because I have the free version of
Yeah.
Zoom. So I want to
Yeah.
thank you for coming on here
You
and
bet.
allowing me to interview.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Yes. No, thank you.
And I'll look forward to hearing the podcast.
8.
Excellent. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.